The recruits didn't recognize her. But one old SEAL limped in, stared at her, and asked softly, "Is it really you?" When she nodded, he stood up straighter than he had in years. Because legends don't always look like they used to. But they're never forgotten. Lieutenant Commander Sofia Delgado had been assigned to Naval Special Warfare Training Center for exactly 14 weeks. At 48, with graying black hair that she kept in a simple bun and weathered hands that spoke of years spent in challenging environments, she moved through her medical duties with the kind of quiet competence that made her blend seamlessly into the background of intense military training. She wore standard-issue medical uniforms, carried a regulation medical bag, and maintained the professional demeanor expected of military medical personnel supporting special operations training. To the SEAL candidates and most of the training staff, she was simply their assigned medical officer, experienced, reliable, and completely unremarkable in an environment focused on developing the next generation of America's elite warriors. The candidates knew her only through routine medical interactions and training support. She checked their health status during intensive physical training, treated injuries with clinical efficiency, and monitored their medical readiness with thorough attention to detail. Her medical competence was unquestioned, her professional judgment was respected, and her presence was taken for granted by personnel who were focused on the demanding challenges of SEAL training rather than on the backgrounds of their support staff. Lieutenant Commander Delgado maintained the kind of professional distance that characterized experienced military medical officers. She was approachable for medical needs, but rarely engaged in personal conversations, never participated in tactical discussions, and seemed content to fulfill her medical responsibilities without seeking attention or recognition beyond her designated role. But sometimes legends hide in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to be recognized. Welcome to Silent Salute, where we discover that extraordinary legacies often walk among us unrecognized until someone remembers the heroes they used to know. Before we continue this incredible story, tell us in the comments which country you're watching from today. And if you believe that true legends never really fade, they just blend into new roles until their moment comes again. Hit that subscribe button to support our channel. We're honored to share these remarkable stories with you. Class 347 was particularly challenging. 22 candidates from diverse military backgrounds, all pushing themselves through training designed to forge America's most elite warriors. The daily routine was relentless, brutal physical conditioning, advanced weapons training, underwater demolition exercises, tactical simulations, and psychological challenges that tested every aspect of human endurance and mental toughness. Through it all, Lieutenant Commander Delgado provided medical support with the same steady competence that had characterized her entire assignment, maintaining the health and readiness of candidates who were being pushed to their absolute limits. The candidates respected her medical expertise and appreciated her professional care, but none of them had ever wondered about her background, her previous assignments, or what experiences had shaped her into the seasoned medical officer they encountered daily. She was simply Commander Delgado, or Doc, someone who kept them healthy enough to continue their brutal training regimen. Among the candidates was Staff Sergeant David Martinez, a former Army Ranger who'd served multiple combat deployments before applying for SEAL training. Martinez was respected by his fellow candidates for his tactical knowledge and combat experience, but he shared the common assumption that Lieutenant Commander Delgado was a career medical officer whose expertise was limited to healthcare and medical administration. Commander Delgado is solid, Martinez had commented to his teammate during their 13th week. She knows her medical stuff and keeps us operating, but she's probably spent most of her career in medical facilities rather than operational environments. Petty Officer Wilson, who'd served as a Navy corpsman before SEAL training, offered some perspective. Career medical officers bring valuable expertise. Martinez, her experience shows in how she handles the medical challenges of intensive training. But Martinez's observation reflected the broader perception among the candidates. Lieutenant Commander Delgado seemed like a competent career medical officer who had found her role supporting special operations training, but whose background was probably limited to medical rather than operational experience. The situation that would change everything began during the 15th week of training when Class 347 was scheduled for advanced helicopter operations training. This was one of the most complex phases of SEAL training, where candidates learned sophisticated air mobility procedures, insertion and extraction techniques, and coordination protocols that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure in operational environments. The training was being conducted using actual military helicopters with experienced Navy pilots who specialized in special operations support. The exercise was designed to teach candidates realistic air mobility skills while maintaining the safety protocols necessary for training operations. Lieutenant Commander Delgado was assigned to provide medical support for the helicopter training evolution, positioned at a safe observation point near the landing zone, where she could monitor candidates for signs of injury while remaining ready to respond to any medical emergencies that might occur during the complex training exercise. The helicopter operations training was intensive and realistic, designed to teach candidates the kind of air mobility skills they would need for actual special operations missions. The pilots demonstrated insertion techniques, extraction procedures, and tactical flight operations that replicated the challenges of operational environments. Lieutenant Commander Jonas Viper Rodriguez was the lead pilot for the training evolution. A veteran Navy helicopter pilot with over 12 years of special operations flight experience, Rodriguez was known throughout the special operations community for his expertise in tactical aviation and his ability to execute complex flight operations under challenging conditions. During one particularly demanding training sequence, Rodriguez was demonstrating low-altitude tactical flight procedures when his helicopter experienced what appeared to be a mechanical malfunction. The aircraft began exhibiting unusual flight characteristics that suggested possible engine or control system problems. Possible mechanical issue with lead aircraft, the control tower announced over the training area communication system. All personnel maintain safe distances while pilot assesses situation. Rodriguez was working to diagnose and manage the helicopter malfunction while maintaining controlled flight, but the mechanical problems were becoming more serious and potentially dangerous. Engine parameters are showing abnormal readings, Rodriguez reported to the control tower. I'm experiencing power fluctuations and control response issues. The helicopter malfunction was creating a potentially dangerous situation where Rodriguez might need to make an emergency landing or, in worst-case scenarios, might lose control of the aircraft entirely. As Rodriguez worked to manage the helicopter emergency, the mechanical problems suddenly became critical. The aircraft lost power and began an uncontrolled descent toward the training area where candidates and staff were positioned. Mayday! Mayday! Rodriguez called over the radio. Complete engine failure. Going down. The helicopter was falling rapidly toward the ground, and Rodriguez was working frantically to execute emergency landing procedures that might allow him to survive the crash. But the mechanical failure had left him with limited control over the aircraft's descent. At the last moment before impact, Rodriguez managed to partially control the helicopter's descent, but the emergency landing was still violent enough to cause serious injury. The aircraft hit the ground hard, and Rodriguez was thrown from the cockpit during the impact sequence. Helicopter down. Pilot ejected. Emergency personnel called out as they responded to the crash scene. Rodriguez had been thrown approximately 20 feet from the crashed helicopter and was lying motionless on the ground, clearly injured from the impact and potentially in critical condition requiring immediate medical intervention. The training areas. Emergency medical personnel were responding to the crash scene, but Rodriguez's position and the severity of his injuries required immediate life-saving medical care that exceeded the capabilities of basic emergency response. Lieutenant Commander Delgado was observing the helicopter crash from her medical monitoring position, and she immediately began moving toward the emergency scene with the kind of focused urgency that suggested extensive experience with critical medical situations. But as she approached the crash site, something unexpected happened that would reveal capabilities that none of the candidates had suspected. Instead of waiting for the emergency medical team to secure the area and assess Rodriguez's condition, Lieutenant Commander Delgado advanced directly to the injured pilot with the kind of confident, systematic approach that suggested advanced trauma medicine training and extensive experience with aviation emergency medical procedures. Critical trauma patient with multiple impact injuries, Delgado announced as she reached Rodriguez. Requires immediate advanced life support and trauma intervention. Her medical assessment was rapid, comprehensive, and demonstrated expertise that exceeded standard military medical training. She was evaluating neurological responses, checking for spinal injuries, and assessing internal trauma with the kind of advanced diagnostic skills that characterized specialized trauma medicine. Suspected spinal compression, possible internal bleeding, and signs of traumatic brain injury. Delgado continued her assessment while beginning immediate medical intervention procedures. Her medical techniques were sophisticated and precise, demonstrating familiarity with aviation trauma medicine that was far more advanced than typical military medical training. Martinez, who was observing Delgado's emergency medical response, was amazed by the expertise and confidence she was demonstrating. "Commander Delgado," Martinez said, "those are advanced trauma surgery techniques. Where did you learn those procedures?" Delgado was working intensively to stabilize Rodriguez while responding. Previous experience with aviation trauma medicine and emergency surgical procedures. But the medical procedures Delgado was implementing exceeded anything the candidates had seen during routine training medical support, and her expertise was clearly the result of extensive specialized training and practical experience. "Commander," Wilson asked, "what kind of previous experience included aviation trauma surgery?" Delgado was continuing her life-saving medical intervention while coordinating evacuation procedures for Rodriguez's transport to advanced medical facilities. Experience that included medical support for aviation operations and trauma surgery under emergency conditions. As Delgado worked to stabilize Rodriguez, her medical procedures were successfully controlling his injuries and preparing him for evacuation to hospital facilities where he could receive continued advanced medical care. Patient stabilized for transport, Delgado reported to the emergency medical team. Immediate evacuation required for continued trauma surgery and neurological assessment. Rodriguez was conscious and responsive, clearly benefiting from Delgado's immediate medical intervention that had prevented his injuries from becoming life-threatening. "Commander Delgado," Rodriguez said weakly as he was prepared for evacuation, "thank you for saving my life. That was incredible medical care under pressure." The candidates who had witnessed Delgado's emergency medical response were processing what they had seen. Their routine medical officer had just demonstrated trauma surgery capabilities that exceeded the expertise of most military medical personnel. But as the immediate medical emergency was being resolved, something even more unexpected happened. Master Chief Petty Officer William Bull Thompson entered the training area. Thompson was a legendary retired SEAL with over 25 years of special operations experience, including some of the most classified and dangerous missions in Navy SEAL history. He was now in his early 60s, walking with a slight limp from combat injuries, but still carrying the unmistakable bearing of an elite warrior. Thompson had come to the training facility to observe candidate progress and share his expertise with the next generation of SEALs. His reputation preceded him. He was a living legend whose operational experience and combat record were known throughout the special operations community. As Thompson entered the training area and observed the aftermath of the helicopter emergency, his attention was immediately drawn to Lieutenant Commander Delgado, who was completing her medical documentation of Rodriguez's treatment. Thompson stopped walking and stared at Delgado with the kind of intense recognition that suggested he was seeing someone from his past. Someone significant whose presence was both surprising and meaningful. "Is it really you?" Thompson asked quietly, his voice carrying a mixture of amazement and respect. Delgado looked up from her medical documentation, and when she saw Thompson, her professional demeanor shifted slightly to something more personal, recognition of someone she clearly knew and respected. "Hello, Bull," Delgado replied simply. "It's been a long time." Thompson's expression filled with unmistakable respect and something that might have been awe. When Delgado nodded in confirmation of her identity, Thompson immediately stood up straighter than he had in years, his bearing transforming from that of an aging veteran to that of a warrior recognizing a superior. "Ma'am," Thompson said, his voice carrying the kind of respect typically reserved for the most legendary figures in special operations, "I never expected to see you here." The candidates were watching this interaction with growing confusion and curiosity. Their routine medical officer was being treated with obvious reverence by one of the most legendary SEALs in Navy history. Martinez stepped forward with obvious curiosity about what they were witnessing. "Master Chief Thompson, do you know Commander Delgado from previous assignments?" Thompson looked at Martinez and then at the other candidates who were clearly confused about what they were observing. "Gentlemen," Thompson said, his voice filled with respect. You've been working with one of the most legendary figures in special operations history. The candidates were stunned by this revelation. Their quiet medical officer was being described as a special operations legend by Master Chief Thompson. Wilson asked the question everyone was thinking. Master Chief, what do you mean by special operations legend? Thompson looked at Delgado as if asking permission to share information about her background and achievements. Delgado nodded slightly, indicating that Thompson could provide some context about her previous service. Commander Delgado, Thompson began, was known throughout the special operations community by a different name, Angel. She was the most decorated helicopter rescue pilot in Navy history. The revelation hit the candidates like a physical blow. Their medical officer was actually a legendary helicopter pilot whose rescue operations had become the stuff of special operations folklore. Angel was responsible for some of the most daring rescue operations ever conducted, Thompson continued. She flew missions that no one else would attempt, extracted personnel from impossible situations, and saved more special operations lives than any pilot in history. Martinez was trying to process the magnitude of what Thompson was revealing. Master Chief, are you saying Commander Delgado was a helicopter pilot? Thompson's response confirmed what was becoming an incredible revelation. She wasn't just a helicopter pilot. She was the helicopter pilot. Angel flew rescue missions that became legendary throughout the special operations community. Delgado was listening to Thompson's explanation with the kind of modest discomfort that characterized heroes who preferred not to discuss their achievements. That was a long time ago, Bull, Delgado said quietly. I'm just a medical officer now. But Thompson wasn't finished sharing the significance of Delgado's background and achievements. Angel's most famous mission, Thompson explained to the candidates, was a rescue operation in Afghanistan where she flew solo into heavily defended enemy territory to extract a SEAL team that had been cut off and surrounded. Thompson's voice carried obvious admiration as he continued the story. The team had been pinned down for over 18 hours, taking casualties and running out of ammunition. No other pilot would attempt the rescue because the landing zone was completely controlled by enemy forces. The candidates were listening with growing amazement as Thompson described what sounded like an impossible mission. Angel flew her helicopter alone, at night, through heavy enemy fire and landed in the middle of the enemy position. She loaded the wounded SEALs into her aircraft while taking direct fire and flew them out to safety. Wilson asked the question that reflected everyone's amazement. Master Chief, how did she survive flying solo into an enemy-controlled area? Thompson's answer revealed the extent of Delgado's legendary capabilities. Angel didn't just survive, she eliminated multiple enemy positions during the rescue operation. She was not only the best pilot in special operations, but also one of the most deadly helicopter gunship operators in military history. Martinez was beginning to understand the magnitude of Delgado's background. Master Chief, how many personnel did Commander Delgado rescue during her career? Thompson's response demonstrated the scope of Delgado's legendary service. Angel's official rescue count was over 200 special operations personnel, but the actual number is probably much higher because many of her missions remain classified. Delgado was clearly uncomfortable with the attention and recognition, maintaining her preference for focusing on current responsibilities rather than past achievements. Bull, that's enough, Delgado said gently. These candidates need to focus on their training, not on old stories. But Thompson understood that the candidates needed to know about the extraordinary person who had been providing their medical support. Commander Delgado transitioned to medical service after her flying career, Thompson explained, but her legend in the special operations community is permanent. She saved more lives than any single person in special operations history. The helicopter emergency that had revealed Delgado's medical expertise now made complete sense in the context of her background as a legendary rescue pilot. Her advanced trauma medicine skills and aviation emergency procedures reflected years of experience saving wounded personnel under the most dangerous conditions. Rodriguez, the pilot who Delgado had treated after the helicopter crash, had been evacuated to medical facilities where he made a full recovery thanks to her immediate medical intervention. When he learned about Delgado's background, he requested permission to thank her personally. Commander Delgado, Rodriguez said when he returned to the facility, Master Chief Thompson told me about your background. I had no idea I was being treated by the legendary angel. Thank you for saving my life. Delgado's response reflected her characteristic modesty. I'm glad I could help, Lieutenant Commander. That's what medical officers are here for. But Rodriguez understood that he had been saved by someone whose reputation exceeded that of most special operations legends. Over the following weeks, word of Delgado's identity spread throughout the special operations community. Veterans from her era began visiting the training facility specifically to meet the legendary angel, many of whom credited her with saving their lives during combat operations. Commander Delgado, Martinez said after learning more about her background, "Why didn't you mention your background as a rescue pilot when you were assigned here?" Delgado's answer reflected the humility that characterized true heroes. My previous service was completed, Martinez. My current responsibility is medical support for your training. The past doesn't change present duties. Thompson, who had remained at the facility to work with the candidates, provided additional context about Delgado's transition from legendary pilot to medical officer. Angel retired from flying after 22 years of rescue operations, Thompson explained to the candidates. She chose to transition to medical service so she could continue supporting special operations personnel in a different capacity. The candidates began to understand that Delgado's medical expertise wasn't separate from her legendary flying career. It was a continuation of her lifelong commitment to saving special operations lives. Wilson asked about the connection between Delgado's flying background and her medical expertise. Commander, how did your experience as a rescue pilot influence your medical training? Delgado's answer revealed the integration of her flying and medical capabilities. Rescue operations required advanced medical knowledge to keep wounded personnel alive. During extraction flights, medical training was essential for effective pilot performance. Her medical expertise, which had seemed routine to the candidates, was actually the result of years of treating wounded personnel under the most challenging conditions while simultaneously flying complex rescue missions. The story of Delgado's identity as the legendary angel became a defining moment for Class 347, demonstrating that extraordinary legacies often hide among routine personnel assignments. The most important lesson you can learn from Commander Delgado, Thompson told the candidates, is that legends don't retire, they find new ways to serve. Angel is still saving special operations lives, just through different methods. Delgado's medical training programs were enhanced by her rescue pilot experience, creating scenarios that integrated aviation medicine with tactical medical procedures in ways that reflected operational realities. Medical support for special operations, Delgado explained to the candidates, requires understanding that medical emergencies often occur during complex tactical situations where medical and operational requirements must be integrated for mission success. Her training scenarios included aviation medical emergencies, rescue operations requiring medical coordination, and decision-making exercises that combine medical and tactical considerations under extreme pressure. The candidates who had initially viewed Delgado as routine medical support became some of the most dedicated students of integrated medical operational procedures. Commander Delgado has shown us that the most effective special operations personnel are those who can contribute across multiple capabilities, Martinez told his teammates. Her background demonstrates that excellence in one area enhances rather than limits effectiveness in others. Delgado's helicopter crash response, which had revealed her advanced medical capabilities, became a model for training that integrated aviation and medical expertise in special operations scenarios. Years later, when Delgado had transitioned to other assignments, her legacy at the training facility lived on in enhanced medical training programs and in the understanding that legends often continue their service in new roles. Her story reminded everyone that extraordinary achievements don't fade with time. They evolve into new forms of service and contribution that continue to benefit the communities they choose to serve. The moment when Master Chief Thompson recognized the legendary Angel working as a medical officer became a powerful reminder that heroes often walk among us unrecognized, continuing their service in ways that may be different but are no less meaningful than their original contributions. Delgado's transformation from legendary rescue pilot to dedicated medical officer demonstrated that true service isn't defined by recognition or glory. It's defined by the willingness to continue contributing wherever contribution is most needed. The candidates learned that legends don't always look like they used to, and that the most extraordinary people are often those who choose to serve quietly in new roles rather than resting on past achievements. Master Chief Thompson's recognition of Delgado and his obvious respect for her legacy reminded everyone that true legends are never forgotten. They're simply waiting for the right moment to be recognized by those who understand the magnitude of their contributions. This story was brought to you by Silent Salute. Before we leave you today, here's our question. Have you ever discovered that someone you knew in an ordinary role was actually a legend in their previous career? Have you encountered people whose current quiet service concealed extraordinary past achievements? Tell us in the comments about the moments when you realized that legends often continue their service in new, unrecognized roles. And if you believe that true heroes never really retire, they just find new ways to serve, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. Every story reminds us that extraordinary legacies often walk among us unrecognized, and that the most remarkable people are often those who choose continued service over past glory. We'll see you in the next story, where we'll discover another incredible tale of hidden legends and continued service.